Sally said, after becoming a dietitian, I decided that it doesn't matter how good my nutrition program is if I can't communicate it properly to my audience. And that kind of hit me when I worked at Ballet Total Fitness as a dietitian, and I put 2 years into developing this weight loss and fitness website for our members. And I went into one of our gyms and just pretended like I had no idea, nothing about ballet, went in like I wanted a membership. And I asked the personal trainer, well, do you have a nutrition program? And he goes, no, but I can give you one. I thought, well, what did I just spend 2 years doing? So basically it was a disconnect between like the corporate office and the field. So that's where I was like, I think I really want to move into the communication sector. And so I've been working with different brands. Right now I work with Gatorade and Propel in regard to determining what messages they want to come out with and how to portray those to different audiences. So if we're speaking to health influencers like registered dietitians or athletic trainers or strength coaches, versus consumers or media. And so that's kind of what I'm going to dive into today. And you can feel free to stop me at any point if there are any questions, but I'll obviously have time at the end as well. So in order to translate and promote whatever you're trying to get across, you need to know who your audience is and what your audience understands. Obviously, if your audience is health professionals, they're going to know something very different than what consumers know. That's where appropriate message comes into play. To promote, you need to know where your audience lives, when your audience is most receptive to what you have to say, and why they want to hear what you have to say. So those are your delivery platforms. So what I'm going to go into today is a little bit on the media landscape, the importance of the science communications, message mechanics, target audiences and behaviors, and then building relationships with reporters. So here, this slide kind of encompasses a lot. Getting news and how we get it is just basically very different. It used to be TV, radio, newspaper. Now it comes at you in thousands of different forms on a variety of platforms 24/7. So what that means in today's world is anyone with a smartphone is a news reporter, and that's what gets very dangerous. But not everyone is an expert. So moving into the importance of science. Here in the U.S., when it comes to nutrition and physical activity, health professionals are the trusted source of consumers. 50% said that health professionals were. So that's very, very important. But you also then have to look to see what their other sources are. Health-focused websites is next, scientific journals, government agencies, but then also food manufacturers, friends and family, TV personalities. That's where it gets really scary. I play a lot in this food manufacturer space to make sure that to help them come out with the accurate messaging. It's sometimes very scary when they give you a press release and they have some nutritional claim in there and you're like, whoa, that is not your product. And they have no idea because they have no idea that, a good source of, protein actually means anything. So you have the trust factor. So you are the knowledgeable source of information. You can translate the information so that people can understand it, and you give a face to the story because you are the expert. Now, there's also trust abuse. Here, our little friend, Dr. Oz, it was found that 54% of his information was not backed by science research or it was contradicted. So not sure if everyone's familiar, but he has had some legal issues recently. Yes, the government basically called him out on his poor science, and he had to stand in front of a variety of individuals who weren't very nice to him in regard to, because a lot of times he'll take products and he'll back it up, say, this is scientifically proven, and there isn't science behind it. So he has that benefit that people believe him, but now he's abusing it. So this is kind of the meat of what I want to talk about, the message mechanics. So messages, what they do is they allow you to communicate what you want to communicate outside your field to people who aren't within your specific profession. Messages make it easy for you to tell your story, and they ensure consistency. They also make it easy for others to remember it. If you remember one thing, remember this. That's a phrase that you'll probably repeat a lot when you're talking to somebody, just to highlight what you want them to remember. So in regard to a typical message, you want to have whatever, so maybe it's you have a scientific article that you want to promote. What you would do is break down what are my key messages. So pick 1 to 4 things that you want somebody to remember. If you only have 30 seconds to talk to somebody, how can you communicate your article to them? And so typically, like I said, there's 1 to 4 primary messages, and then you have proof points underneath that, and that's basically the support. When you're developing your messages, you want to aim for sound bites, and that's just basically something that can be remembered. So here in the U.S., think, I have a dream. Like, people remember this. So sound bites are usually 15 to 20 words. They're approximately 7 seconds for TV, and then 140 characters for social media, those who want to tweet a message. And then you use techniques such as alliteration, enumeration, parallelism, basically any type of analogy or story that will help your message be memorable. You want to write in terms of your listener's self-interest. So listeners are constantly asking, so what? Why are you telling me this? So those are the type of questions that you want to be asking yourself when you're preparing your messages. So what does your audience know about your topic? Why do they want to know more? What questions might they have? This is why it's very important to have a very good understanding of your audience. So here's an example for sports injury. A primary message might be there is a growing epidemic of preventable youth sports injuries that are dismantling kids' athletic hopes and dreams at an early age. Another primary message might be armed with the correct information and tools, today's young athletes can remain healthy, play safe, and stay in the game for life. So if you just said those 2 things, you'd get your message across. There's a lot of injuries, but they're preventable. Now, if there's more time, you go into the support. Well, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, high school athletes account for an estimated 2 million injuries, 500,000 doctor visits, and 30,000 hospitalizations each year. And a lot of times this can go back and forth in a conversation. So if you were, talking on the phone with a reporter, you might have delivered the primary message. oh, really? Well, how big is this issue? And then you jump into the support. So you can make this very conversational. Same thing with like a morning show or, really any opportunity. So when delivering, it's very important to provide the context. So you explain the big picture and why the audience should care. And then you jump into your headline. So then you tell them what you're going to tell them, and you follow with the detail, which is the proof point, and then you tell them what you told them again. So it's a lot of repetition. Key messages to you might sound very repetitious, but that's how people start to remember. And you also have to remember that if this is something that maybe you're talking to 5 different reporters, you probably sound like a broken record to yourself, but you're talking to 5 different people. So to them, you don't sound as like a broken record. And never give them anything you don't want them to use. It's very, very key. So some basics, you want to avoid jargon and generalities. Every profession has their, different acronyms and jargon. And, you want to make sure that you're being relatable and that people understand you. So make sure you avoid jargon. Speak in terms your audience can relate. As I said before, repetition. This is something I'm trying to get you guys to remember. Stories to support or personalizing your message. So to ensure that your message gets delivered, here's one technique that is used a lot. And it's called blocking and bridging. And basically what you want to do is you want to block phrases that move a conversation from an off agenda, and then you want to bridge to an on-topic subject. So if they ask you a question, you can answer it, but then you bridge over to what you want to say. And so I'm going to show you. So here it is, the kind of the mechanics of it. It's a ramp. Response equals your actual answer plus your message point. So here are some samples. I think what you're really asking me is, so they've asked a question. You might not necessarily be answering it. You're saying, well, this is what I think you're actually asking me. And then you bridge to your message point. There's a lot of these. So let me clarify. What you're really talking about here is, that demonstrates how complex this issue is. But what it all comes down to is, and you jump into your message. So it's basically a really nice way to say, this is my agenda. I'm going to tell you what I think is important here. You'd have to ask them. So this is basically if they bring up somebody else. A lot of times they might be, so for Gatorade, they might be like, oh, well, Powerade does this. It's like, well, you'd have to ask them, but this is what I can tell you. Here's another key thing. You never say no comment. The only acceptable way to refuse the answer is to block it without bridging. So you block by explaining why you can't answer the question. So it might be results pending or proprietary information, pending litigation. Obviously for research purposes, there's a variety of reasons you might not be able to answer something for the media because you want to make sure that you're getting the first big response from it. So keys to success. Remember to speak to the media's audience. So that's one thing I didn't dive in here, but for media, obviously there's a variety of media. And if media is reaching out to you, you want to have a good understanding of who their audience is to make sure that it's not only appropriate for what you want your message, but that you're speaking at the level of that audience. So if keeping to the U.S., if it's Self or Shape or Health Magazine, your science research message would be a completely different level to that audience versus what it's going to be to, a peer or even like a trade publication. Use messages consistently and often. And make them your own. So it's not necessarily memorizing those key messages. It's just keeping those key messages as a guide. Consistently review and update your messages. So, as you present your messages to someone, whether it's in a presentation or with the media or in a lecture, you might see that there's things that you want to tweak. So it's just basically what you would do for everything else. Make sure that you're tweaking accordingly so that it's just becoming more and more succinct. Prepare and practice. It makes a huge difference. I'm sure a lot of you have taken presentation classes, but, talking in the mirror and doing your presentation, it's, you can see things where, like, if I'm doing this over here, I'd be able to see that. Or, like if I'm constantly clicking something, like you might not, if I'm doing anything, I don't notice it because I'm up here talking. But if I'm in front of a mirror, I'm going to start noticing these things. And actually, like, speak out loud, because that makes a big difference versus just, like, saying it in your head. Because you might think you know it, but then when you're going to say it, you just start to stumble over your words. So this is kind of what I was getting to. Messages aren't just for the media. They can work in all forms of communication. So whether it's, preparing abstracts for papers or one-on-one interactions, business discussions. Your flight here, somebody might have asked you why you were coming, and you can easily deliver a key message about, well, I'm coming to this conference, but this is what my research is about in, 30 seconds. An elevator ride, the cocktail party later on tonight, and your social media channels, of course. So I'm going to dive now into understanding your target audience. Your audience, it depends what your paper might be on. Back when, like, my last paper was on weight loss and human weight loss with males and females, but the stronger data was in the males. So if I want to take that data and share it out, this is a tricky one because it's probably the moms or the wives that are actually paying attention to this kind of information. So in this case, while the subject matter is on males, I'll probably still go out to the female demographic that's, either a wife, most likely a wife, or a girlfriend. So then you need to find out where she lives, and I'll get into that. It could be, parent. Are they a parent or not a parent? Is it race specific? Are they an athlete or not an athlete? Am I speaking to a health professional or a consumer, policymakers or scientists? So you just really need to dive into who do I want to get this message out to. And then you have to find out where and when do they consume information. Now that we have social media, consumption habits are very different. Millennials are really around the clock on social media, but it might be, for me, I might check my Facebook in the morning on the way into work, maybe at lunch, probably not, or at the end of the day when I'm going back home from work. So you have to, once you identify your audience, you need to start looking into their behaviors and what they're doing and when they're doing it, so that you can determine maybe radio isn't a good outlet for you. Maybe you're never going to even talk to your audience via radio. Now I don't know many people who listen to radio. You have this XM and Sally and all this stuff that you might have to, dive in a little deeper to really find out where they are. At the end of the day, effective messaging is basically the right message, the right place, at the right time. That's how you get your message to your audience. So I believe this is the last thing I want to talk about, building relationships with reporters. First, you really have to understand the roles. It's a transaction. It's not a conversation. From a business perspective, the reporter has a job and you have a job. And this, you can transpose reporter into, whatever your audience is. But for a reporter specifically, their job is to find and share news that will keep people engaged. So a lot of times, what are reporters looking for? They're looking for controversy and conflict. They're looking for something new, unique, and unusual. They're looking for something useful on trend or local. And this, I think, is a lot of times, the media will definitely skew the science. So even if you delivered your messages very clear, they're looking for something that's going to grab attention. So they might skew it and to grab attention, but then as long as the information in the article is accurate, we would probably leave it alone. But if it goes against what the actual science is, that's where a lot of times you can reach back out to them and say, hey, that's not right. Can you please correct it? Your job is to give people something to remember and repeat. Know where you want to go, even if the reporter doesn't. And so this kind of goes back to the blocking and bridging. So if the reporter's taking you here and that's not where you want to go, you block it and you bridge it back to where you want to go. Don't think of the media as friends or enemies. It is a business transaction. There's a variety of ways to connect. So if you guys work at companies or universities, they usually have media relations teams that you can connect with if you want to get your science out. Obviously, always using peers that have experience in reaching out to media. You can call the specific outlets you want to go to, or you could be more proactive and if you have a social media presence, pushing messages out that way. You can comment on relevant sites or attend scientific conferences. You can even follow journalists. My profession is now communications, and so that's how I keep a pulse on a lot of my key contacts, is following them on Twitter, and then I have Google alerts. So basically I can just say, put in their name and, maybe like nutrition and fitness, whoever it is, and then that information will automatically come to my email. So that might be just a great way for me to be like, hey, I saw you just wrote this article. I really liked it. Blah, blah, blah. Basically just making sure that they know who I am. So then when I want something from them, when I want them to tell my story, they're like, oh yeah, I know her. She's been following me. I'll I'll look into this and see. So it's not about just building the relationship with the reporter when you want something, but just continually doing it so that you have that relationship already, so that ask is a lot easier. And then you can always submit letters to the editors. That's a great way to get your opinion and your message out there. Now, if the media contacts you, you never want to leap in. You want to ask questions. And so, what's your deadline? What's the story you're pursuing? Who else are you talking to? These are very, very important questions. I've had some colleagues fall into not asking this question, and then they end up in an article where it's them versus this other health professional that have opposing views, but they never knew that's how the article was going to be written. So clearly it would have been a lot different if they knew that, because they might not have accepted it. Might have been like, I don't want that matchup. Like, I'm not looking for a fight here. If it's a good opportunity, buy a little time. So you prepare and practice, and then you call them back. So a lot of times journalists will pressure you into it and saying, like, well, I'm on deadline, and it's okay, well, what do you ask your slew of questions, and you'll be like, okay, well, can I give you a call back in an hour? This isn't the best time for me. And at least then you can get your messages together for that specific audience. And it should be just basically you have your key messages and you tweak those for that specific audience. But also that's just a great way, like, not giving yourself time. Like, if you jump into it, it's just, you're just kind of asking yourself for trouble, because unless you're sitting there and just being like, oh, I'm just waiting for this reporter to call me, like, you're probably not going to be the most prepared you can be. And remember, there's no such thing as off the record. If you don't know, don't speculate. I should have put a video in here, but there's a variety of examples on YouTube of people thinking they are no longer being recorded by the media, and they just start bashing somebody very important, and it's all recorded, and then it goes up on YouTube. And then now what are you doing? You're wasting your time on, this fire drill that was unnecessary. Remember, the questions are up to the reporter, but the answers are up to you. So that's where these techniques come into play. Like, you say what you want to say, and you stop. And never repeat a negative. So even if they ask a question in the negative, don't repeat that question. Rephrase it via the message you want to deliver. So that's all I have. I'm not going to be able to stay for the full conference today. I apologize. I will be here again tomorrow. But I do have some handouts in the corner over there of the table on media interviewing, and then different techniques. So if you guys are interested in that, you can definitely take that as you wish. But if there's any questions, I think I can take questions right now.